I'm very happy to have another smiling face with us. Right now, we have with us Namrata Narendra. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Namrata.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and inviting me to do this. So just as an introduction, my name is Namrata and I'm speaking to you from the city of Bangalore in India, which has been my home for about 15 years on and off. And I feel like it's the city that I question the most. And what I'm going to speak about more or less originates from how I've, seen the city and grown up in the city. It is my research and practice playground, and it's really shaped the person I am, but also the urban practitioner that I am today. So maybe that'll help me introduce who I am and what I do. I'm actually an architect by training, so I've taken a whole lot of different paths to be where I am. And maybe I will just briefly go over what I've done so far so that it's also like a personal reflection on all that I've done. So I trained as an architect in Bangalore, and since graduating, there's been like any other graduate architect because of this severe moral dilemma as to who we are building for and what we are building towards. My questions began around trying to locate the emotion of solidarity and collectivization and collective action in city making, which is very implicit, tacit, but it's overlooked in spatial training. So that's where I come from, this whole domain of space.
By the way, let me just stop you there. People may not know when you say spatial, it is SPATIAL, space, not special.
Yeah,
Right.
not special. Yeah, it's
Right.
spatial, like
It's
related to
spatial, yeah.
space.
It's related to space, which means how the city is set up.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So
Let's just continue.
around city and city building.
Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, I think where I started really questioning was during my architecture training, which was that there really cannot be an architectural pedagogy and architectural education without the politics of it. But unfortunately, in India, while I was studying it, which was from 2014 to 2019, that was very removed, and it was purely on understanding space as is and built environment as is, without the layers that it envelops. So that was my introduction to, looking at things through the lens of, space and place, and understanding the layers that it holds. And from then I transitioned slowly towards more reality, like real work, which was away from designing spaces, but trying to understand what to do with already existing spaces and how to improve it. So in late 2019, I joined this organization called Community Design Agency, which is based in Mumbai. And so the organization looks at working with most of the marginalized communities in the city to see how to collectively equip come together and equip them with tools and also facilitate improvement of their built environment. So here, my role was mostly working with the community in a resettlement colony in Mumbai. And this was actually the entry point into the urbanist practice, or what people term as urban planning and understanding the city. This was an entry point. So here it was a bit of a pivot for me from looking at buildings to looking at city as a whole. And here I also understood ways of engaging with critical reflections on the built environment. So in my personal, professional, and I think political journey was a big, like, pivotal moment, because I got to try, fail, and also learn along with, very, like, a great team and also very different people about collaborative tools, processes and approaches to rethink, reimagine, re-envision, and reclaim spaces. And by spaces, I mean like collective areas, like, say, like common alleyways, roads, circulation spaces, corridors. So very, very small space, spaces that we encounter in an everyday basis, but look at it in a different way so that you reclaim it as your own and collectively maintain it. So I used art as a tool to bring people together to question their surroundings. And I worked with a really, really good artist who came up with ideas to kind of engage the youth there too. So the core of it was, how do we work with and support communities to build a dignified life and livelihood? And I think here, what was very crucial was to understand, also because we are in the era of climate change, and that was also very significant in the work that we did, although there was no vocabulary for it, there was no language to understand climate change. And also climate resilience and, climate justice, all of these words are very in trend right now, and also something that came up in a lot of literature that we read. But like, when you're working with communities, this is not something that you encounter on a day-to-day basis, because it's something that is felt and experienced but not really like spoken about. So this vocabulary is not very prevalent, and it's got a scientific origin, and the dissemination of it is very clinical and scientific. So what I felt personally was that very few organizations invest the time into being part of that community, understanding the language. And by language, I just don't mean like the languages that they speak, but also in terms of understanding their experiences, their background, and political affiliations, and the interconnections that they have leveraged to access resources not already available to them. So understanding how they're disrupting and challenging systems that are already there, that was something that I felt like this opportunity allowed me to see. And as practitioners and researchers, I feel like we need to start with accepting that what we build up is, and we need to learn from what is already there and not to undo or redo. So I think that was my biggest takeaway. So
Okay.
that was where my, like, as I mentioned, my pivot into the urban space started. And post this, I started my urban fellows. So there's an urban fellows program as part of the Indian Institute for Human Settlements in Bangalore. And so after nearly 2 years at this organization, and with the uncertainty of the pandemic world, I moved
Yeah.
back to Bangalore, which is my home, to study at IHS. And here my focus areas were on governance, infrastructure, and ecology, which really shape some of the work that I do today. And there were two very interesting projects that I was a part of. One was a study looking at different identities associated with cycling practices in the city, which aren't necessarily consciously thought about, like livelihood practices, livelihood cycling practices, commute cycling, and serious leisure, like almost sports kind of cycling. So this was something that we did a lot of research on. And the other project was looking at informal arrangements made by various communities in low-income neighborhoods to compensate for poor public service delivery of drinking water. So this is again one more slight shift into understanding space, understanding access, but not so much in a art community engagement way, but slowly navigating it to understand infrastructure, to understand water use, water access, social identity, all of that. So I think here, from being an architect, which is a little bit more technical and scientific, I started slowly moving into a more academic like space, but also somehow personally trying to connect both practice and research.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is always a hard task, because everyone's either a researcher or either a practitioner, but how do you be both at the same time so that you have
Right.
real-time experience as well as you're applying the academic research that you are doing. So post this, I moved to a very small town in the Western Ghats, called it's Kotagiri, and it's in the Nilgiris area. And I continued an independent project there to question, if water is supplied to all, then why are there very few recipients of it? And I wanted to displace that question from the city context, because I was looking at it in Bangalore and Mumbai, but investigate it in a different location and different water system, because that's a hill water system, and we're always looking at valleys.
Right.
So the community well-being team at Keystone Foundation, which is the organization that I was at, agreed to support me while I did this in the town of Kotagiri. So for 2 months, I trekked through tea estates and refugee colonies and various villages to understand the link between water supply, social and spatial identity, and how it influences access. And again, so constant reflections for me were community, like people are groups of people are always looked at as a homogenized identity and something that's very distant and outside, like a distant thing outside of us, as though we're not part of the community or like we don't relate to that community. And it's also looked at outside of policymakers, and their differentiated needs are not really looked at the micro level and like at a very specific level, contextualized to that level. And this is where I feel like some of the work that I do right now is quite important in bringing that need across. So that was a 2-month project there, and from there I moved back to Bangalore. So if you notice, there's been a lot of moving out, moving back into Bangalore, because I feel like this is my home playground, and all of the questions that I have finally end up here. So then at Bangalore Sustainability Forum, which is where I next moved to, where we worked on building frameworks and engaging on collaborations with the city across diverse groups like activists, NGOs, community representatives, to find a way to and make space for dialogue in a world that is, well, rapidly becoming polarized.
Yeah.
So I think from a very like micro level, I started like moving across scale. So at this organization, I was more at the city level, engaging with different, sort of, I mean, for lack of a better word, stakeholders. But so that was mainly what we did at that organization, and it helped me because in the city that I was at, I got to meet people from the government, people from like, political representation, people from like grassroots NGOs, but also activists, teachers, private corporate, people from private corporations. So it was very interesting to see how different institutions from public sector, private sector, or civic society interact in planning, designing, governing, and inhabiting this city, that the built environment, both formally and informally. And it was also very interesting because we did this through like various modes, through film festivals, through podcasts, through focus group discussions, retreats. It was a like bunch of different things. And then from there, I moved to where I am now, which is, so I work as a researcher at Water, Environment, Land and Livelihoods, Well Labs, which is based in Bangalore, between Bangalore and Delhi, and we co-create research and innovation for social impact in the areas of land and water sustainability. So my work here predominantly revolves around, again, community engagement in the very like a town area of Chintamani, which is close to Bangalore, and understanding lake custodianship, like how do people come together to collectively reimagine or find a collective vision for a lake in their neighborhood. So again, this I feel like sort of culminates most of the work that I've done around water, around communities, around collective ownership and resources. And it's very interesting to also look at it in terms of the diverse team that we have, which comprise of, hydrologists, architects, urban planners, sociologists, economists. And to really look at it in each of those perspectives is for me, it's a new experience, because then I get to learn from not just the place that I'm working at, but also from the team that is working at that, in that place. So I think overall, my trajectory has been a little, I'd say not very mainstream, because with architecture, what tends to happen is that you move into the building industry and you start your own practice. But yeah, so I think a lot of times I'm very grateful for architecture to be that to be the core of where I started, because it really allowed me the perspective that that I have now of opening up doors in different avenues, which maybe a science degree might not have, provided me. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey on that front. And also personally, I feel like because I've been anchored in this city, there's also been a lot of growth through my work, but also through understanding both personally and politically what it is that that we as an urban citizen, play a role in the city making process. So yeah, I think that sort of like captures,
Okay, good.
yeah, my trajectory at a whole.
You're the first architect I've talked to here
Oh,
on this platform. I know architects. I understand the language you are using. I'm quite familiar with the jargon and the language. Okay, so that's separate. You're the first one on this platform. So since very few people choose to be architects, B Arch is not a very popular degree.
yeah.
So I want you to talk to young people as to how you chose this degree. What was your thinking, your motivation, resistance from others, whatever, just how you chose this profession? Be arc.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because very few people actually ask this question because everyone's just very curious. Oh, that's very interesting. This is very different. Nobody's, very few people do it. Although during the time that I did it, it was in trend. Everyone wanted to be an architect. But I think where my
Well, not
interest originated.
everybody. I've interviewed so many people. Not one
So
of
so
them.
in 2014, when I joined, I think at that time, anyone I spoke to said, "Oh, architect is great. I'd like to be it."
All right.
And a lot of the colleges were filling up their seats for architecture.
Yeah.
And I think because also at that time construction was really booming, and I'm talking specific to Bangalore because all the colleges were full for architecture.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's not a before you join, you go through a lot. There's NATA, which you write to get into, architecture degree, and it's a lot of training that you do. And you're also told straight off that it's a 5-year degree.
Yeah.
It's very expensive because you
Yeah.
have to buy equipments for model making, field visits, and
Yeah.
it's not a. And to be honest, I should also speak that I come from a place of privilege to be able to have been able to, do a degree in architecture because
Yeah.
it's not like other degrees which you can just have a bunch of textbooks and be done with it. There's a lot of investment in the degree itself.
Yeah.
But I was very keen. I did biology in my 11th and 12th, and the family tradition was to be an engineer. But um, I've always moved towards like literature and the arts, and really to find a juxtaposition, I was like, okay, maybe architecture is something that'll open doors wherein I get to write, I get to read, and I also get to draw and do, the arts part of it and be like a technical practitioner of some sort.
Yeah.
So that was my entry point. But a lot of people were genuinely very interested in building and making, which is something that I think was very useful to learn, to make with your hand. The model making, it's a very physical degree. So you really have to be invested, like, through the nights. You work continuously, and
Yeah.
it's not a very rewarding degree in the sense that once you graduate, the market is not great in the sense that you work. So historically it's an apprenticeship sort of
Right.
practice. Like
Right.
you apprentice with an architect, and then you build from there, and you
Right.
keep moving up.
Right.
So the pay is very, very bad for a
Yeah.
graduate architect, which is why so many people move into tech or move into urban planning, and very few, continue to stay on. And those that stay on uh, have like links with other architects or like contacts which they can, use to build their firms. But it's not a very rewarding degree. So I think for me, it and every architect goes through this. Once they graduate, there's always a dilemma as to why did I choose to do this, because I'm not reaping any benefits out of those 5 years of hard work. But I think as time, as you grow in time, you also realize that there's a lot that you learn in architecture which is not restricted to the practice of architecture. You learn about landscape, you learn about, infrastructure, you learn about cities, you learn about lighting, furniture. So you're working across scales. So I think that's very, very interesting to have, because whether you choose to stay in architecture or not, you already have a very different perspective on many different fields. So I feel like architecture makes you like the jack of all trades, and then you have to figure out, okay, what do you master in?
Yeah, I think the architecture profession still doesn't do enough on green architecture, I feel. What do you think?
No, so there's a lot of greenwashing that happens. So everybody's talking about doing things sustainably, and there are a lot of certifications that go into it. A few of them really try and implement what they speak, but it's very hard to do with, like, at small scales it might be easier, but at a larger scale you end up expending so much energy that you lose out on that sustainability aspect of it. So I would say that there are a lot of very genuine efforts towards it, but at the end of it, the capitalist, that part of it kind of takes over, and you lose out on a lot of what is truly green, and it ends up being greenwashing. So um, I would say that there is a whole movement that is looking at it both at, like, house level, like small building scale, but also at a large, like, city, like nature-based solutions, those kinds of things that are coming up at a city level. So somewhere in between those two, there is some good effort going towards it. But right now, what we are seeing and reading are mostly the buildings that are, well, unfortunately to say that they're being, they're greenwashing what they're doing. So that's
Yeah. Okay. All right. I understand the point.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell us?
Uh, no, I think that's about it. I think I would there are very few architects right now that are really in the field of architecture, and very few people are motivated to do it because it's a very arduous task to take on. But I would say, if you have the privilege to go into this field, it's very interesting because you can really navigate it in very, very many different ways. Um, so I think that's one of my biggest takeaway from where I was like 5, 6 years ago, regretting my decisions, to where I am now. It's been a really big arc. So I think I would say, if there's any degree that gives you this sort of perspective, and through meeting like different, like what is truly interdisciplinary, I feel like architecture right now at least is practicing some of it, to some extent.
Yeah.
I would not say it's succeeded, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you so much. Unless you want to add something else, we can end it here.
No, I think
All right.
that's,
Good.
yeah.
So let's end it here. I want to talk to you offline separately,
Yeah.
but that's a separate issue. All right. Good. Thank you so much for being here and telling us what you have achieved and where you are still, and all about architecture. So thank you, Namrata. Let's say bye to the viewers. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.